A big news coming in this morning on the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli cabinet has decided to go ahead and possibly take a decision on the hostage deal. Israel's cabinet has approved an agreement to secure the release of, at least for now, 50 hostages who were abducted into the Gaza Strip and had been in Hamas captivity since the 7th October terror onslaught. The cabinet has approved the deal, however, for return of for 50 hostages for a multi-day ceasefire and possibly return and free the Palestinian prisoners as well in exchange for the women and children. Remember, we are talking about in total 240 hostages, and not just Israelis. Remember, there are Americans, Thai, Nepalese hostages as well. There are many other nationalities and ethnicities, including women, children. There is a child who is barely 10 months old by the name of Kufir with his mother. They are currently in captivity since 7th October. There is, of course, pressure that was also building on Israeli government and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that while the ground offensive had been on, hostages was where there was no clarity on. Rajesh Pawar is joining me now from Israel. He's in Tel Aviv presently. He's been non-stop covering the Israel-Hamas war. How should one see this? You've been speaking to a lot of families, Rajesh, whose family members, children, women have been kept in captivity of Hamas. What does this hostage deal mean? What will it be in exchange of, in return of, and who possibly will include in these 50 hostages? What is the pattern? Over to you, Rajesh.
Look, this has been going on for a long time now. These families of hostages have been putting tremendous pressure on Netanyahu government to somehow make a deal with Hamas. They said no matter what, government has to do whatever it takes. They must bring their near and dear ones back. They said if there needs to be a ceasefire, if there need to be exchange of prisoners, anything which government has to do, government must do. And somehow now we see that Netanyahu government has buckled under this pressure, and there were kind of cracks in the public opinion in Israel. The unity which we saw, the solidarity, the coming together of all Israeli people after 7th October attacks, it somehow seems to be cracking now. There were protests which say ceasefire now. And now it has resulted in this, what we saw now. And it's not only that there are babies which are 9 months or 1 year old. There has been a birth also. There was a woman who was pregnant and she gave birth probably to a child 2 weeks back as per the families of the hostages. And what we know now is, as of now, 4 days ceasefire will be announced, which will come into effect 24 hours from now. That is a legal angle, because most of these people who will be released by the Israeli government are convicted terrorists, convicted for the murder of Israeli citizens.
Shocking.
So if any citizen of Israel who wants to represent against this in the Supreme Court can do so in these 24 hours.
That's interesting. What you're telling us, Rajesh, this is what a democracy also is about, that despite all that going, they are still giving an option to anyone who has a say in this process, and that's what Israel has been about. But remember, there's been a lot of pressure, specifically with regard to hostages who've not been able to be recovered in this ground offensive. Rajesh, I request you to stay on with me, because this is a big development coming in on the Israel-Hamas war. This is what has happened now. While you're looking at the visuals of the ground offensive, airstrikes, drone strikes, Israeli cabinet has now approved an agreement to secure the release of roughly 50 hostages. The deal is expected to see the release of these 50 primarily Israeli citizens, mostly women and children, but there could be other nationalities and ethnicities too. But we are being told this will happen on a daily basis. They're not going to be a direct 50 hostages released. It's going to be on a day basis, but in exchange, what has Hamas asked for? Israel had to agree to a ceasefire for at least 4 days, and this will be for the first time since the outbreak of the war. Israel has agreed to release nearly 300, at least for now, we are being told, Palestinian women and Palestinian prisoners who have been there, some of them convicted of serious charges, but there are some teenagers in prison too. Amid the talks, IDF operations in Gaza continue. IDF has released a video claiming Hamas terrorists used a Gaza mosque to make and store rockets to target Israel. Israel has claimed that Gaza City Mosque at Zayalun was a weapons manufacturing laboratory and a storage facility.
יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל Outside, there is a lot of nonsense talk, as if after we cease fire for the release of the hostages, we will stop the war. So I would like to clarify, we are at war, and we will continue to fight until we reach our goals. In war, there are stages, and also in the returning of the hostages, there are stages. But we will not let go until we reach the absolute victory and until we bring them all back.
I want you to understand, a mosque in the area of Zaitun has been used as a factory for the production of weapons. Soldiers entered the mosque and conducted a search. Working in cooperation with soldiers from the Yahalom unit, and after the forces checked that there were no traps, they discovered a tunnel shaft. In addition to this tunnel shaft, the soldiers went further below and discovered a workshop for making rockets.
All right, I'm now joined by the IDF spokesperson, Jonathan Conricus, right now, and he'd been constantly updating us about what's been happening. Jonathan, the ground offensive has been on, and there are a lot of visuals of tunnels that have surfaced of how they were being misused. Now there's a reference to a mosque as well. But the hostage deal currently is the big update that's come. Can you tell us a bit more about it, of how and why has the government decided to go ahead with it, and who are we expecting to possibly be released this time?
Hello, good morning, and thank you for having me. Well, hopefully we will see the release of 50 Israeli civilians, women and children, from Hamas captivity. They've been in captivity now for 46 days and nights after they were violently taken from their homes in Israel. And if everything goes according to the agreement, and that is a big if, because Hamas is a corrupt and deceitful organization. We cannot trust them, hold them at their word. So we will have to be very vigilant. But if everything happens according to plan, then we should see in installments of at least 10 hostages released every day. And there may be additional hostages released after the 50 are released, but the beginning, the deal is for 50. We're talking about Israeli nationals, some of them with dual nationality. I don't know the breakdown of the nationalities yet, but some of them with dual nationalities. And it will be happening parallel to a temporary pause in combat activities.
This also is reflective of Hamas clearly is keeping women and children specifically in many ways, whether as human shields in Gaza or as hostages here. Jonathan, but there was a speculation and concern that the ceasefire, so to say, could help Hamas regroup again and attack Israel and the IDF even more while they're on the ground. So what is the caution that the IDF will be taking at this point to ensure that these 4 days do not let the Hamas regroup, and what will be the next step with regard to the ground offensive?
Well, yes, you're very correct. You know, last time that we had a ceasefire, an official internationally brokered ceasefire with Hamas, was in 2014. And that ceasefire was violated by Hamas, and they used the ceasefire in order to attack Israeli troops in Rafah, in southern Gaza, and they abducted, or they took the body of a dead Israeli officer, and they have been holding on to his body ever since 2014. So we have that memory from Hamas. We know that we have to be vigilant. There is no doubt that Hamas has been begging for this ceasefire in order to replenish and perhaps get our boot off their neck. They've been desperate about it, and that is why they are now willing to release these hostages. We will be vigilant on the ground, and we will continue to monitor the activities from the air and other locations. And once the temporary pause is over, we will be at Hamas again. The aim of the war still remains very simple: to dismantle Hamas and to bring back all of the hostages.
Right, I appreciate you joining us. Jonathan Conricus, he's from the IDF, he's a spokesperson. He had been on the ground as well in Gaza and is constantly updating us. It's going to be a big moment for hostages to be released. But remember, we're talking about 240. 50 is still a small number. We're talking about many more hostages still in captivity, including women and children. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us. And Rajesh Pawar, Gaurav Sawant continue to be with us. Gaurav, one question from you also. You know, this had been a big concern. Can we say that in some way there was a lot of pressure building up on the Netanyahu government, and they had, and that also remains concerning at this point? Gaurav, over to you.
So families have been mounting pressure, but this is a decision that's been taken by the war cabinet in Israel, and even the far-right parties are on board. The information is between 10 and 12 hostages would be released each day, and for every additional day of ceasefire, another 10 to 12 women and children will be released if it actually works out. There is a lot of pressure, not just within Israel, but the Americans, the British, the French, several other countries, Qatar, of course, the main interlocutor, other countries are also involved in this negotiation for the release of hostages. So two things are clear. Israel has made it very clear it will not release any murder convicts, because about 100 to 150 women and children in Israeli prison will also be released to Gaza custody or in the West Bank. And Hamas has made it clear it will not release any officer or soldier of the IDF. Women and children first, the elderly next, Israeli nationals first, and then foreign nationals. So that's the deal that's been worked out and approved by the Israeli war cabinet. So the entire nation in Israel, the government, the opposition, the Shin Bet, the IDF and Mossad, they are all on board. So it's a national decision to, one, release prisoners, two, cease fire for some time, and three, get the hostages back. But the officers I've been speaking to say that their operations against Hamas will begin once again as soon as the hostage situation is sorted out.
Gaurav, please stay on with me, because joining me right now is also Rajesh Pawar, who's in Israel. Rajesh, like the IDF spokesperson, also gave us that first reaction and told us how this is a big deal, but this is also concerning, because while there will be prisoners exchanged, you're telling us there is also a ceasefire, and that ceasefire could actually in some way give an advantage to Hamas to regroup. IDF will also have to find a strategy, because this will decide if the war continues or may actually halt for a long time.
Look, Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it absolutely clear that IDF will continue its operations till the time Israel achieves its goal, which is complete destruction of Hamas in Gaza. This is just a pause, which is for 4 days as of now, and Gaurav rightly said that with every additional 10 hostages being released, it will be increased by 1 more day. But let me tell you that as far as the operations are concerned, IDF is going to face a lot of opposition. It will be much more difficult for them. The longer the pause, more difficult it will be for them, because that will give time to Hamas to regroup and also for the cadres to escape from north of Gaza to south of Gaza. But the pressure has been so much on Netanyahu government. In the last 4 to 5 days, we have seen how public opinion got divided in Israel, and everybody was pressing that whatever needs to be done, there must be a ceasefire. And as a result, we see that finally it happened.
All right, Rajesh Pawar, Gaurav Sawant, and also the IDF spokesperson joining us for the latest. This is going to be a big news. 50 hostages are set to be released, but in batches, which is 10 per day. And that is basically so that the ceasefire can continue. But what about other hostages? Where are they? In what condition they would be? And then what happens to the Israel-Hamas war while the casualties in Palestine, in Gaza Strip, also are escalating? We'll continue to track that big international story in just a short while.